Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the Home Organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to Room by Room, the Home Organisation Science Insights podcast. Fast fashion dominates our world. Clothing is often viewed as disposable. Charities and thrift stores often receive a surplus of clothing, and overconsumption persists. And because of this, the impact on our environment and, more invisibly, our mental well-being is staggering. Yet there lies a sustainable alternative to fashion consumption, which is minimalism. So today, we're joined by social scientist Dr. Amber Martin-Woodhead, whose research focuses on minimalism and sustainable fashion, to learn more about the psychology behind minimalism, explore practical tips for decluttering our wardrobes, and the broader social and environmental implications of embracing a more intentional approach to fashion. Currently serving as assistant professor in human geography at Coventry University, Amber specializes in economic and feminist geography with an overarching research focus on geographies of consumption. Now, that's a lot to handle. That's a lot to take in, but we'll get Amber to explain in a minute. Hi, Amber. It's great to have you on the show. How are you going?
Hi, Marie. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about what your role is at Coventry University and what your background in sustainability and minimalism is all about.
Of course. So I'm a researcher and lecturer at Coventry University. And in terms of my lecturing and teaching, I teach on the geography courses there. And I specialise in a module called Shop You Drop, the Geographies of Consumption, where I teach all my lovely students all about the world of consumption and its impacts upon our planet. And in terms of my research, I focus on sustainable consumption in general, with a more specific focus on minimalism. So I've been conducting a research project on minimalism and doing interviews with lots of minimalists from around the world over the last quite a number of years now. And I've been interested in the overarching question is how can minimalism, or can it contribute to more sustainable lifestyles as well? And I'm also very interested in sustainable fashion, and I do sort of a tangent of research within that area. And it crosses over within my research on minimalism, talking about how people and what people do with their clothes, the minimalists that I speak to, and this idea of minimalist fashion and what it is and how it could potentially be a more sustainable fashion alternative.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a niche topic to be an expert in, and especially to go into academia for it. So it sounds incredibly riveting. And could you also tell us a little bit about how the environment has been impacted by fast fashion and overconsumption?
Of course. So the environmental impacts of fast fashion are absolutely ginormous, and it's predicted that the fashion industry contributes more to climate change than aviation and shipping combined. It's a huge, huge problem. And if you think about fashion through all the stages, so imagine you have a t-shirt and you're thinking about it through the seeds of where it came from, literally the cotton plants. You're talking about massive amounts of water. Cotton's a really thirsty plant. To be able to just grow it, pesticides, fertilizers, if it's not organic, which is the majority of cotton is. If you think about the Aral Sea, which has completely disappeared just because of, well, not completely, but almost disappeared because of cotton production. And then if you think about the next stage, so going into where it might be produced in a factory, huge amounts of energy is being consumed. There might be huge amounts of offcuts from waste fabric. your t-shirt might be dyed. It won't naturally be that color that it comes in, and it might have water runoff in rivers. And that's just sort of, this is all just touching the surface, really. And then if you think about that t-shirt and how it's going to get from, say, where it's being produced, maybe it's being produced in Bangladesh, and it's going to get to you in Australia or in New York, wherever you are. We think about food miles and try and eat more locally, but often we don't think about fashion miles and the massive amounts of energy is used to transport fashion across the globe. And that's before we've even got it into the store. And I often ask my students, what about the environmental impact in store? And no one can ever sort of think of any. But if you think about it, if in physical retail, the huge amounts of energy just used to keep a store running, not to mention all the plastic that these garments arrive in and then get unwrapped, and plastic hangers, which are sort of a real bane on the recycling world. And that's before we even got it home. And then one of the greatest environmental impacts of our clothes are actually at that stage, when you get it home for the care of your clothes. So the washing and tumble drying process has a huge environmental impact. And then if your t-shirt's got maybe some polyester in it, you're thinking about then microfibers and microplastics getting into waterways. And then, of course, disposal. So in the UK, we have over, I think it's 400 tons of clothing going into landfill, around that each year. And it's something like, it's been estimated that globally there's a garbage truck full of clothes that's dumped every second. And then, of course, there's huge issues about that, because clothing, it doesn't just, sit there, it'll decay. Methane's released into the atmosphere, increasing global warming. And causing huge problems that way, beyond just the space it takes up. And then, of course, we have plastic materials in our clothes, like polyester, won't decompose for hundreds and hundreds of years. So a small question, but a big answer. And I mean, I could spend hours talking about it, but that's just my sort of like whistle-stop tour of some of the environmental impacts along the way.
Yeah, for lack of a better word, yikes. It sounds like there's so many aspects to the fashion, like the process of getting your clothes, playing into climate change here. And well, I feel like we're too far ahead in society to now be like, let's do away with clothes and walk around naked. So we have to think a bit more carefully about what's the most efficient way, I guess, to
Yes.
Lower our consumption. So that's what we'll be delving into today. But before we go further into detail, I'd like to get to know you better. This is Have You Met Amber? And the first question I want to ask you is, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Oh, good question. I like to paint. So I like oil painting. I started doing that a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love it. And I can spend all day doing it if I didn't have a day job. So I do it when I can in my spare time. So that's my favourite hobby. I also really like Pilates as well. I got into that a few years ago, and it's the only fitness habit I've ever stuck with and been vaguely good at. So I just sort of like keep at it.
So Pilates is like, it's approachable. It's
it's not gentle. It's really hard if you're doing it right, but it's one of those. It's no cardio or like spin class. No. It's a bit more. It's not difficult. It is really difficult, and you are in severe pain after a Pilates class, but it's definitely no spin class where you walk out wanting to throw up. I couldn't be dealing with that. It's not for me.
Relate to that. But with oil painting, did you teach yourself, or did you go to a class when you were younger, or?
I actually just found a little art studio. So I live in the middle of a village in rural England, right in the middle. And there was a lovely little art studio in our next village. And I thought, that looks nice. And they had a little course there and it was 5 sessions, and you'd go along and they'd set you up with your easel and your paints. And the teacher basically showed us how to do it, like where you start. And I just completely fell in love with it. And I was like, I found my calling, other than acting, of course. And then, I just couldn't stop. So now my house is like not hugely minimalist when it comes to paintings. There's just got like paintings everywhere, and I'm running out of wall space.
Yeah. And do you keep this separate from your kid? I remember you saying that you had a little
Yeah,
boy.
I do.
Yeah. Do you keep that in a separate room? Does he ever come in and want to maybe paint with you?
Oh yeah, he's quite interested, and he's very complimentary. He's 6, and he's absolutely adorable. And he'll go, "Oh, that's a really nice painting, Mummy. I really like that." And he was just saying to me at dinner yesterday how he wasn't very good at drawing people, and I was like, "Well, I can help you, And he was like, "Oh, yes, you could, Mummy. You're actually a very good artist." I was like, "Oh, thanks." So yeah, we're definitely. He's not as passionate about it as I am. But when he was smaller, we constantly had easels out and doing lots of daubing and painting and things like that. So yeah, it's a nice thing. And yeah, if he ever wants to do it, I'm more than happy for him to have a go as well.
That is adorable. And now that we got to know you a little bit better, I also did want to ask you a little bit about your home organization and household habits and stuff like that, because it is a home organization show.
Fair enough.
So how would you describe your interior style?
Oh, what a great question. So I would probably say it is a little bit minimalist. So I like things very calm, very tidy. Yeah. My mum, if she's watching this, will laugh because she always thinks I'm incredibly tidy, which I am because it makes me feel calm. And I like quite neutral color palettes. I like things all to go together. But I'd say in terms of interior design, I'm really into Japandi, so Japanese, Scandinavian, that kind of like relaxed look that's also quite comfortable and warm as well. I'm really big into Japanese culture. I was lucky enough to go to Japan a few years ago, and I just love the design aesthetic and everything about it. So anything Japanese and I'm in.
Yeah, I will have to say that that's a pretty common answer for people who are into minimalism.
Yeah, probably. Very, very, yes, generic, I imagine.
Yeah, no, but I do love it as well. I love Japanese interior design. They have the most. I wouldn't say it's innovative because I guess to them it's kind of like normal, I guess. But they have very interesting ways of simplifying everything in a way that the rest of the world hasn't really thought of, or like in Japanese interior design, platform beds are so common, and that isn't as common like anywhere else in the world, but it looks so simple and yeah, that's all I can really say about it. Like also it gets like it just reduces it, not it doesn't reduce, but it limits the amount of dust that collects underneath your bed, which is
that would be good.
Yeah,
because I get a lot of dust bunnies. I have a hardwood floor, so it's just constantly, and like you look under there and think, how is it
exactly Japanese platform beds, like it's probably not the reason that they did that, but
probably not, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. And is there a space or a room in your home that you're particularly fond of?
It's probably might be the room I'm in now, which is my office/garden office. I was lucky enough, so in lockdown we had this shed. This was a shed, and we had it made into a separate office space because what it's like when you work from home a lot. It's so nice to be able to get out of the house and not be part of the hustle and bustle of what's going on. And it also allows me to do things like this because my little boy would be waking up any minute now and would be running and go, "Mummy, Mummy." So it kind of keeps those boundaries between work and home separate. And I just really love it because it's probably one of my bolder colour choices in the house because it is green. And that was the idea. And so it's also green and brown because I wanted it to be this sort of like outside in look. So it sort of merged in with the garden. So I feel very blessed to have this room that's quite tranquil and calm.
I love that. I love the green and brown color combination. It does.
Thank you.
When I first saw the room that you were in, it was giving like, it was just giving nature. It was giving like easy, but also not too in your face. So I really like that a lot.
Thank you.
And yeah, good job on the color. I really
you.
like it. Yeah. You're welcome. Anyway, now that we got to know you and a little bit about your interior style and what you do at home, let's move on to the interview section. And to start, I would love to get your opinion on what home organization means.
Well, what it means in general, or to me?
Well, I guess both.
Both. Okay. Well, I mean, it can mean different things to different people, and people can have different levels, I guess, of home organization. But I think for me, home organization means, well, I do it for a feeling of calm, because often there's this idea that objects can speak to you. Not in a weird way, but if you see something on the floor, it's sort of saying, pick me up, put me away, or at least that's what happens to me. I'm quite a sensitive person. If I see something, I'm like, all right. So for me, it's this idea that everything has a place, and that if you think, okay, oh yeah, where's the stapler, or where's the paintbrushes? I know where they're going to be, because they're not sort of halfway around the house or in places I wouldn't expect. So it's this idea of everything having a home, so everything's quite easy to find. So it's that element of it. There's also, I guess, for me, not having too much stuff to begin with. And of course, what is too much depends on your personal preferences. But for me, not having too many things really just gives me a sense of calmness, and because there's less things to sort and organize and worry about and store and repair. So it's easy to find things because there's not too much and everything has a space in a home. That's what.
Yeah, that's really well said. And more in line with our topic for today, what does decluttering do for organization in our homes?
Well, I think decluttering is a tricky one for me, just from a sustainability point of view, because you could have nothing in your home, but if you're constantly buying things and then just getting rid of them, it's not particularly sustainable. And I know that's not quite what your question is, but I always like to sort of point that one out. But decluttering can be a really important part of keeping a space kind of manageable, particularly, I mean, that's something I find having a little one, because it's a little bit easier, I think, if you're not having sort of dependence. If you're a certain age, the things you need are probably the same when you're a certain age as when you're 10 years down the line. Whereas with little ones, they constantly need new things. Yeah. So there's this kind of constant stream of clothes and different toys. So for me, decluttering plays a part, particularly within children's stuff. So what I do in the house is I have a special cupboard, and it's a bit like the room of requirement in Harry Potter. You open it and I have certain boxes, and I have one labelled charity shop, one labelled sort of clothing, textiles, recycling, and one labelled just general recycling. So if things like, it's just little things like little batteries or bits of metal or anything goes in there, and then they might not get full for a really long time, but when they do, that's when I then try and pass them on to find a new life for them, because I really try and avoid putting anything in the bin. So all these like tiny things end up in the recycling box, to try and sort of just gently let things pass through when they're no longer needed.
Yeah, that's great. One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Indeed.
Yeah. And that's actually something that my family did as well. Not exactly for sustainability purposes, but because, like, stereotypically enough, my parents were really thrifty and didn't want to waste anything. So we had hand-me-downs from like older cousins and whatever that we can't wear anymore. It's from when I was a kid all the way till now, when my youngest brother, who's like a decade younger than me, we are passing on his stuff to our cousins' kids now. So it's like going through the generations
Yeah.
because they still can be worn.
Definitely.
They just,
especially with kids'
yeah.
clothes. They don't wear them for very long. So often they're absolutely fine. Because they've not been wearing them for 10 years. They've only worn it for a few months.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes like there can be like little holes here and there, but they're not substantial enough to be like, okay, I'm abusing my child, and giving them like half torn clothes. Like that's not, like, they're like little tiny holes and they can absolutely still be worn. So yeah, I think that's great to like pass down your stuff to people that or if not the charity shops as well. And you know what? Anyway, I'm gonna save the rest of us talking about this for later in the episode. But for now, what are the fundamental principles of minimalism that we should know about?
Good question. So minimalism can be a tricky term. So I'm going to unpick it for you a little bit. So the etymological root, so like where the word comes from, is actually from art and architecture. So we're talking about like 1960s avant-garde art, particularly in New York. This was a time of this kind of the minimalist art movement was all about what you might expect. So neutral colors, limited color palettes, sometimes like repetitive shapes, geometric shapes, and a kind of absence of the artist from the work. So it was just about this work. And then that kind of got transposed to sculpture as well. So things like the work of Donald Judd and lots of like bricks and things like that you kind of might see as like in modern art. And then, of course, in architecture. So it was kind of mid-century modernists who kind of were really into this idea of quite minimal, sleek design that we now associate with that mid-century modern style. And it was Ludwig, I can never pronounce his name right, but I think it's Mies van der Rohe, who kind of is thought of creating the maxim of less is more. And he referred to that in art and in architecture. And then we move on to minimalism, which we're going to talk about today, of lifestyle minimalism. So when I say minimalism from now on, that's normally what I'm referring to. And that's the idea of taking almost this maxim of less is more and applying it to our lives. The idea of less being a preference amongst minimalists for a reduced amount of possessions. And of course, that's very subjective and might depend on the person. But also maybe a reduction in personal commitments as well. So not sort of overscheduling and busyness. So this idea of simplification, both in terms of stuff and lifestyles. And this is with this sort of intention of making space for more. And the more element is usually considered to be maybe immaterial things that add a lot of value and meaning to one's life. And again, that can be entirely subjective. And also, that's kind of my definition of minimalism based on talking to lots of people about what it is and doing lots of research on it. But someone might say they're minimalist and define it slightly differently and go, oh no, for me, it's this. A lot of people sometimes think it's about, they get a bit mixed up with the aesthetic of minimalism and the lifestyle. So a lot of the minimalists I interviewed were like, people think I live in this white shoebox and I really don't. And for me, it's nothing to do with interior design. It's about the lifestyle. And then I guess another element about it is although it's kind of supposed to be not about stuff. So this idea of not thinking about stuff. Actually, I found a lot of the minimalists I spoke to were really cared about their things. And it was actually it was a lot about a focus on stuff and valuing it really highly. It wasn't just about getting rid of everything and not caring about anything in terms of the material world. It was about valuing, kind of having less to value more in terms of obsessions. Does that sort of make sense?
100%.
Great.
I always did think very, I did spend a lot of time thinking about how the aesthetic of minimalism is so different from the lifestyle of minimalism and really living minimally, and how like there are all these misconceptions about what the lifestyle of minimalism is like, and most people, when they think minimalism, what comes to mind is the aesthetic and not the
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yes.
And I honestly never really was a minimalist before. Now a little bit more and trying to go into it, and I can definitely agree with that it's not about not valuing your things at all. If anything, it's just minimizing the amount of things you have to value, and it brings just so much more fulfillment, I guess, to your life, because you're also it's kind of like a cycle. You have less things to value. You value your few things more, and that is what drives you to continue having less things and keep, it's great. It feels good. Is but like, do you have any, well, what can you tell us about the psychological factors that drive this this lifestyle?
Oh, definitely. So the kind of motivations that people have yeah, of course. So when I spoke to a lot of different people, I noticed some kind of key themes that were happening. The first was sort of situational factors. So lots of people got into minimalism because of, say, moving home a lot. And so they had to pack up all their things, and then when they got there, they realized they didn't need half of it, that sort of thing. So there were those sort of more lifestyle factors that encouraged them to uptake it. Or lots of people spoke to me about various different reasons. So for some, it was environmental. And lots of people were really motivated to get into minimalism because of the environmental impacts they saw of buying less stuff. Some people saw it as more of a byproduct of the lifestyle, like a nice, oh yeah, I'm not really doing it for environmental reasons, but it's nice. Some weren't bothered at all. It was mainly for the personal benefits. And the personal benefits that people derive from it are sometimes practical, like it's easier to move, it's easier to travel if you don't have lots of stuff in it. But mainly it was to do with people's happiness and their well-being. People talked a lot about the psychology of this feeling of letting go, or weightlessness came up a lot. This idea of stuff kind of causing stress, and therefore having less stuff causing them less stress. So there's been studies done about the amount of clutter around you, and it actually does often cause stress in a lot of people, and higher cortisol levels. So people spoke about the idea of having less to then feel calmer, have a more manageable home. Lots of people spoke about that, and just that idea that they wanted a space that they could manage. And all these things are quite interrelated. And the other thing that always came up was about time and saving time, as people spoke about not almost this idea of possessions taking up our time. So if you've got lots of stuff, that's time to sort it, store it, not just research it to buy it, manage it, and then repair it, and then eventually, if it's sort of died, get rid of it.
Yeah.
So it was this idea of saving a lot of time for people as well.
Yeah. And conversely, what can you tell us about the psychological factors that drive the consumption of fast fashion? Why do people feel this need to keep keeping up with fast fashion?
Well, it's interesting to say keeping up. So a lot of the minimalists I spoke to were saying they didn't want to keep up with the Joneses, that classic phrase. Loads of people that just kept coming up in all these different interviews. And I've always found, to me, I'm not a psychologist, so I have to just put that out there. But for me, I think fashion's really paradoxical, because it's almost like this psychology of wanting to stand out. So we use fashion as an expression of our identity, who we are. That's really suits me, or that jacket's that's so me. But at the same time, it's also about fitting in. Often some people do, but lots of people would want to walk down the street and everyone stare at them because of what they were wearing. It's this psychology of almost being part of the pack, but also expressing identity as well. So it's a really, for me, it's a juxtaposition, a little bit of a strange one. And in terms of the psychology of sort of where we are now with consuming more, in terms of fashion, I mean, there's obviously the situational factors of fast fashion or ultra fast fashion has arisen. So if we were talking about many decades ago, there just simply wasn't access to that many, the huge amounts of cheap clothing. So there's obviously the situational stuff. But in terms of more the psychology, I think that is an awful lot to do with technology and social media. So, for example, I'm a millennial. So when I was growing up, fashion for me was, occasionally saving up money to buy Vogue and, going into town once a week and going into like the local clothes shop and seeing what was there. Whereas, and in terms of the people I saw, I just see, people around me or people on the TV or magazines. Whereas now, of course, we see, if we're talking about keeping up with the Joneses are everywhere. So you can see hundreds and thousands of people on your screen every day wearing all kinds of different things. And they say comparison is really the enemy of happiness. And this is a big reason why I don't do social media, is because we see so many other people. And I think that's got a huge amount to do with it. So if you're on certain online platforms, you're going to see lots of people wearing lots of different things, having specific channels about fashion. Oh, and then it's so easy, isn't it? Just, and then you can buy it, click buy it now. So it's a really different ball game now.
Yeah. And decades ago, there wasn't anything like micro trends, whereas now there are so many micro trends every single year.
It's a different fashion model. So it used to be this idea, fashion cycles were spring, summer, autumn, winter. That was what it was. So you just have kind of 2 big seasons a year. And then we transitioned into the fast fashion model of it being, say, 52 cycles a year. So every week there'd be new styles landing. And now that almost seems outdated. I'd say we're in a period of sort of ultra or super fast fashion where it's not every week, it's every day. Like you say, micro trends, there's always something new. It's just constant transition.
Yeah, this is actually quite frightening because fast fashion has always been an environmental concern. And now with fast fashion speeding up along with technology and news cycles, it just sounds to me like it's potentially getting even worse and at a much faster rate. So how many people would have to turn into minimalists in order to combat what damage has been done?
Quite a lot, I imagine. Quite a lot. Or even not just minimalist, but just not buying lots and lots of stuff. lots of fashion.
Maybe that's a study that should be done. How many people need to be minimalist to?
Yes. Gosh, yes.
Because that will bring that like numbers do like if you put out the numbers clearly. I don't know if there's a way at all. I'm not a researcher, but I just imagine that's going to shock people. And not to say shock factor is the key to doing everything, but this time around I think shock factor might be the way to go.
Maybe.
So could you tell us from your research, what has it found out about minimalism that would mitigate the effects of fast fashion?
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, if you're sort of taking the idea of minimalism and people's approaches to consumption, they can often be seen as quite helpful for sustainable consumption, even if people aren't intending to do it. So just that simple thing of that first step of reduction, not buying or accumulating new things, is the first thing. So of course that can be transposed to fashion. If we're thinking about how to be more sustainable in fashion, is that the first step that no one ever wants to hear is just buying less. I think it's like retailers don't want to hear that. Often consumers don't as well, but often that is the most important thing, is just buying less. And minimalists obviously do buy things. I found in my own research that when they do, they have a huge preference for this idea of quality over quantity. Of course, fast fashion is the antithesis to that. Fast fashion is quantity, usually over quality, dare I say. It's all about quantity. So adopting that approach of buying less but better, I would say, is very, very helpful within fashion. Now, this is where I have to say there are barriers to that, and it is difficult for a lot of people to go, oh yeah, well, I will spend that much money on a t-shirt and not a cheap one. And I think we have to be really careful here to not seem exclusionary when we're talking about this idea of quality over quantity. I always like to talk about one of the minimalists I spoke to. She was amazing, and she was so into it, and she was into fashion, and she loved good quality stuff. But she was on a budget, and she just said, I just buy everything secondhand, Amber. She was on eBay. She was like, I've got this amazing thing, this wonderful cashmere jumper, and I bought it, and it cost me barely anything because I got it secondhand. So there are workarounds to that, and you don't always have to spend a fortune to get something that's half decent. But I always just like to mention that sort of little bit of a caveat there. The other thing is, not all minimalists might do this, but in terms of fashion, just buying secondhand to begin with is fantastic, because just avoiding buying new things is one of the most sustainable things you could do. If you've already got something that's in circulation, brilliant, because it's already there, the impact's been made. So let's just keep using what we can use for as long as possible, particularly with clothes. There's huge secondhand markets for clothes. It's very easy now for us all to share our clothes as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other big thing. In terms of more to do with minimalist fashion, I mean, I guess in terms of minimalism in general, it's based on classicness, timelessness, particularly within, if we're talking about minimalist fashion, which I think is a bit of a fusion of minimalist art and minimalist lifestyle. So it's the minimalist lifestyle, having less in your wardrobe to begin with, being very careful about what you put into it. And then on the other side, it's that artisticness of having a kind of maybe more simple things that are timeless. You're talking about micro trends. Well, I guess minimalist fashion would be the antithesis to that. It would be talking about long-term style, elegance. It doesn't mean you have to not dress well, but not, buying something that you just know is just going to look a bit odd in a year's time, because it's so out there. So yes, this idea of kind of my mum always loves to talk about Coco Chanel. She's a huge fan, and she used to say, fashion fades, style is eternal. This idea of timelessness, chic, elegance, not needing the latest trends, because that way you can buy something and it'll still look good a decade later.
Yeah, especially if you figure out what your personal style is. If that speaks to who you are, and everyone's personal style changes every so often, but certainly not as quickly as micro trends. So I feel like that's also a big factor as to maintaining a minimalist wardrobe, is figuring out what you personally like and not following that
exactly.
that
and I think it would be sad if you put in, say, minimalist capsule wardrobe, say if you put it on Google, it will all come out with black and white. It will look really lovely, but that might be not your thing at all. And if your thing is bright colors and prints, but I mean, you could still have a minimalistic wardrobe if it all goes together, and you don't have tons and tons of wardrobe space. It's whatever works for you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also feel like, if your style is that maximalist aesthetic where nothing really looks like it goes together, but you just put them on and it's the look, then go ahead and do that. Don't even bother sticking to black and white things.
Exactly, because you could have someone who you go, their style's very minimalist, but then you get home and you look in, they've got like 5 wardrobes, sort of 50 white t-shirts or something. So it really just does depend.
Yeah, 100%. And with that in mind, it is mindful consumption is basically what we're trying to do here, in response to the overconsumption that the entire world has been doing for the longest time, me included. Not shading anyone, like I've done it. We were all brought up to consume in ridiculous amounts, but mindful consumption is something that does come into a lot of conversations about minimalism. So could you explain what that concept is and what it does for the minimalist lifestyle?
Sure. Um, I think it's kind of, for me, in two parts. The first part is mindful in terms of actual ethical, sustainable consumption choices. So thinking about where our stuff, not just clothes, but where everything comes from, who made it, under what conditions, how far it's traveled, what the environmental and social impacts of our stuff. So I think that's one element of being mindful. I say the other element is more, and a lot to do with what I saw in how minimalists acquire objects when they do acquire them. So I found certain sort of trends across what people were doing. So the first one was a lot of minimalists wouldn't do window shopping. They wouldn't just sort of go and browse around the shops and just have a look around, and were really kind of against impulse purchases. There was no sort of quick purchase. Oh yeah, I'll just get one of those decisions. So there was none of that. When the people I spoke to went shopping, it was very planned, very mindful, very considered. So they'd go out with a list of what they wanted and then they go and get it. And they take a lot of time to plan and research what they wanted. And that's what I found the most interesting, because people say minimalism is not really about stuff. But actually, I found that people were spending a really long time when they did get something, acquire it, weeks and weeks of research and thinking about stuff, because they knew that when they got it, that was going to be their, one pair of jeans or the thing that they wanted for a long time. So they wanted to get it right. And I actually thought that was really sensible, because how often do we buy something and then go, oh, actually, it wasn't quite right? And then we end up having to buy something again. And so taking a lot of time to plan purchases, research them. One of my favorite things that popped up that people did was if they wanted something, they'd create a kind of wish list, and they'd put it on my wish list or put it on the list. And then I put it away for a week or two, and I come back to it. And if in the 2 weeks I still want it, then I might go ahead and get it. And often, again, how often do we all go, oh, I just get that, and then you don't really need it. So that was, I think, a really clever approach, and something I sort of started to do myself, even because I just thought, oh, what a good idea. And then the last thing was just really thinking about being mindful over whether people really needed it. And a little bit like you were saying at the beginning, like it is kind of needs over wants. And, do I just really want this, or do I need it? What will it really bring to my life as well? So lots of kind of practices that I found that were just about being really mindful, considered consumers when they did consume.
Yeah. Another thing is that thrift shopping is becoming more of a hobby these days. It's a trend on social media. I think for various reasons that I guess aren't that relevant to the episode, but for anyone who's wondering, because the economy is quite sad and Gen Zs are looking for a way to be able to spend a little bit of money without spending too much of it. But what a lot of people have been doing doing these hauls at various thrift stores and then not wearing any of it. What would you say is the issue there, and how people should maybe think a little bit more about their thrift shopping purchases?
Oh, do you mean sort of going a bit OTT with, buying lots of secondhand? Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. It is a bit of an issue, and I have talked to someone before, actually, who was writing an article about this. So people can get a little bit carried away, can't they? Because things can be so cheap, and you can sort of almost overdo it, can't you? And think, and I think there is a little bit of a danger there, isn't it? Just because you think, oh, it's secondhand, so it's fine. And we do need to think about when we're buying stuff, say, from online platforms, there's still, even though it's secondhand, there's still obviously an environmental cost there because it's being packaged. Often people always wrap things in tape and plastic. It's really difficult to recycle. So if you're actually just getting reams and reams of secondhand clothes, that's still maybe not ideal for the environmental elements. So it's still good to reduce a little bit as well. But secondhand is still a far better way to go environmentally. I would never want to put anyone off from shopping secondhand. But I guess if you take in those sort of more mindful practices of go, yes, it is only £2 or $2 or whatever. But, do I really need this? Am I going to wear it? Is it going to sit in the back of my wardrobe? And just sort of maybe stepping back for a minute and not trying to get too carried away.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's so many items. I used to go to thrift stores a lot and buy secondhand. And this was like my transition period between a maximalist and trying to be a bit more minimalistic. So it was a transition period, and there was a period of time where I was buying more secondhand and way less retail, but I still had that impulse purchasing urge. So I did that in thrift stores and then brought it home later and realized I never used it. And that has deterred me because it feels not that good to go to a thrift store, be like, okay, this is for sustainability purposes and several other reasons, and then buy all this stuff, bring it home, and then not actually use it, and then donate it back to the thrift store, which isn't the worst. There are worse ways to consume fashion and items, but it's still it can be avoided, I suppose. So I guess that was a little personal anecdote. I hope that was fun for you.
Of course.
But what I really want to ask now that we've gotten a lot of the practical sides of fast fashion and how minimalism can combat that out of the way, could you give us some insight as to what social scientists like yourself and policymakers are hoping to see in the future of sustainable fashion?
What a great question. What a great question. A lot. And this might be a little bit idealistic. But personally, I would love to see fashion retailers embracing some of the principles of minimalist fashion in terms of longevity. This idea of quality over quantity, but mainly longevity. So selling less, but selling things that are built to last. I obviously, again, very wishful thinking, particularly for ultra fast fashion retailers. But I think an element of longevity could be seen not just in the terms of the quality of clothes being produced, but also in retailers taking a bit of a responsibility or duty of care for the clothes that go out of the door. So creating like repair services in store. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all big retailers had somewhere where you could go, actually, you can just pop back and have it altered slightly, or you can have that little hole mended if you don't know how to do it yourself. So integrating an element of circularity within business models would be amazing. Also within circularity, so if we're talking about that from the first stages, seeing more clothes produced that are from recycled materials that would have gone to waste. So things like recycled, even though it's not ideal, you see a lot of that now, more like recycled polyester and things like that. But if textiles could be from post-consumer waste, that creates an element of circularity into it. But ideally, a shift away from plastic-based textiles towards more plant-based. So obviously things like cotton, but organic cotton. and towards things like that are made from cellulose fibers, like viscose, for example. I think they'd be my main ones, or just sort of taking responsibility for the item once it's been created. It's almost like it goes out the door and that's it. And it's gone into the world, and then it's all the consumer's responsibility. Making it easier for consumers, or fashion consumers, to be sustainable. Because I think a lot of people, particularly if we talk about different generations, are so keen to make sustainable choices, and they'd love to be able to have their things repaired, or they'd love to be able to recycle things properly and know where they were going. Because we often get things with clothing. You have to remember that, you could have had something 20 years, but things do tend to have a sort of an end stage to their life, and making it easier for consumers to be able to maybe just go pop back to the store and go, here you go, but it's going to be recycled properly and it's not going to go to landfill. So giving consumers those options.
Those are some fantastic suggestions, but how attainable do you think they are?
A good question. I think it is attainable, but whether retailers will do them is a different question. However, I do feel that because there is so much consumer pressure now for fashion to be more sustainable, I think we will start hopefully seeing some of these sort of things come into retail. So do you have Marks and Spencer's in Australia? I'm not sure if you do.
No,
it's a real UK institution.
No, but we have it in Singapore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Know that.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, just for example, M&S have been in the news quite a lot in the last couple of weeks because they're introducing a new repair, kind of an inbuilt repair scheme into their retail model, with this idea that people can go back in. And they're one of the really big high street retailers in the UK. They are, like, they're a bit of a British institution, because I think they realise that this is kind of the way that we're headed, and this is more what people want out of their clothes. And there are huge amounts of sustainable, ethical fashion retailers. There have been for a while, but more and more are popping up. But I think, we are at the tip of the iceberg with it. Because of what I do, I'm obviously more aware of it. But I think it's realistic to a point, but it would be nice to see a lot more. And I think we do need to put more pressure on a lot of fashion retailers.
Yeah. I know that I would personally love to see that happening. In Australia, it's pretty, there are a lot of people who are very concerned with sustainability as well. So I have no doubt it would hit off right here. And I also love Marks and Spencer's biscuits. Not like to go on a tangent, but I really like their biscuits. They have one that like is basically puff pastry with like jam in the middle. I don't know if you've had it.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's a special M&S biscuit. Okay, I'll look out for it when I'm next in.
Yeah, my mom used to buy them a bunch, and it was a childhood snack, and I haven't had in ages because there's no Marks and Spencer's in Australia.
I'll just ship you some over.
Yeah, please do.
Little food parcel from M&S.
My last question for you, I wanted to ask about what future research directions you envision would be crucial for understanding more about the relationship between minimalism and sustainable fashion.
It would be nice just to see more. So when I started doing research on minimalism, there was barely anything out there. And now you're seeing a lot more people doing research on minimalism, minimalist lifestyles in general. There is still quite a limited amount to do with like minimalism and fashion and sustainability. So just to see a bit more of it and for research to go down that angle would be great. I'd also really like to see more participant action research. So that's the idea of maybe, say, getting a bunch of people to say, try a minimalist fashion challenge where they were only allowed to wear a certain number of things, or stop buying amounts of stuff or amounts of clothes for a couple of months, just to see how people got on with it. And if it can, because early research has shown it does sort of change people's mindsets about how much they feel like they need, but there's been no like big significant studies about it, other than sort of smaller scale studies. So I think that might be a really interesting route to go down as well.
Yeah, for sure. Those sound incredible, and I personally can't wait to see more research on minimalism and sustainable fashion. I think it's such an interesting topic to research and go explore in academia, and it's really inspiring because like it's also a testament to how to what kind of direction you can take in academic studies and research as well. You don't have to, well, I'm going off a tangent here, so let me just wrap up right now. Before we end off, could you tell us a bit about some of the habits that you would recommend practicing for people who do want to attempt a minimalist lifestyle?
Oh God. So minimalist lifestyle in general, or minimalist fashion?
Minimalist wardrobe, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a bit. Okay. Well, first thing, don't get rid of all your clothes and then buy lots more minimalist clothes. That would be the worst thing to do in terms of sustainability, and definitely something I wouldn't recommend. I think it depends sort of where you're starting from. But have a little look at your wardrobe. And I think one of the best tips I ever heard was about dress for the life that you have, not the life you think you have. And we always hear, dress for the life you want. I don't believe in that. I say dress for the life you've got and what you're going to be comfortable in and what you're going to wear every day and actually make use of. So, for example, we often have, I think lots of people do this, we might have, say, 10 elegant dresses in our wardrobe, but the amount of times we go to a wedding once a year, but actually, what do we spend most of our time doing? Sitting around the house or working from home. And so what you actually might need to invest in is some really comfortable, nice clothes to hang around the house in and be comfortable. So trying to make a wardrobe that's practical for your uses and what you're actually going to need it for. So that would be my first tip. My second thing I like to do personally is have everything go together. And like I said before, that doesn't have to be muted colours. If that's not you, that's not you. For me it is, but it's not for everyone. But I just love, one thing I find quite easy in the mornings is going, okay, I just know that all these trousers are going to go with these colour tops because they all just sort of work together and nothing's going to massively clash. So it just makes things so much simpler, because it all kind of goes together and you're not like, I can't wear that with that because that will look weird. So yeah, the practicalities of it, obviously what you're actually going to wear and be comfortable, and then the next one, thinking about colour and everything going together quite well as well. Not feeling as well, I think just being quite liberal with the idea. If you've got a massive wardrobe and you wear it all, well, fair enough, but you don't have to get rid of everything to have a good wardrobe. But I think the most important thing, and I want to sort of shy away from, is that idea of having to have some massive clear out all the time and always be decluttering things, because actually if you're just buying loads more stuff, it's like I said, it's not sustainable. So the biggest thing I think to focus on if you want to build a useful wardrobe that's easy and you're going to wear all the time is just being really mindful about what you're bringing into it and taking a bit of time to go, what do I actually need? What's going to be useful, and not sort of rushing into any decisions. And I'd like to think that would make your life easier in the end. I think it was it Barack Obama who had, when he was president, he said he was just going to have loads of really similar outfits and suits and things, so that when he got in the morning, he just had to pick a suit, so he didn't waste his mental energy on these micro decisions. And I think that's one thing that can bring you.
Yeah, that's actually something that a lot of prolific people do.
It's true, isn't it?
Yeah. Every time I if I think of all the people I've worked with who do that, I haven't worked directly with fashion editors, but I have worked indirectly with them, and I do see I know someone who would only they only have one outfit. It's just white tee, like plain black pants that are appropriate for the office, and that's it, and that's all they wear to the office because they want to use their mental energy for something else, their work or something like that. And a lot of prolific people do it.
I think Steve Jobs did it, didn't he? He was always in that sort of same look, very simple.
And also the people who look up to celebrities and go like, I want their wardrobe, I want to dress the way that they do, kind of neglect the fact that celebrities have personal stylists. They don't have to spend the energy to dress themselves if they don't want to. They don't have to be constantly thinking about what they wear because they have someone else to do that for them. That's why they can look good all the time. But that's a little bit on the tangent.
That's okay. It's an interesting tangent. I think it's quite an important one as well because, you don't want... clothes should be a joy, not sort of a stress. I think making it anything that makes it easier and something that, when you get up in the morning and it's called the wardrobe moment, when you go, okay, who am I going to be today? What am I going to wear? And if you can make that a little bit easier on yourself and always know you've got a few things in that look nice on you and are comfortable. Exactly. I mean, as I got older, that's become, I'm just like, no, that's scratchy. Not wearing that. I'm not putting up with that anymore. I'm just not, I don't care. I think maybe with age comes a certain degree of not caring so much what other people maybe think. So I think, I think maybe also having clothes of fashion for you, not for others. And because so often that's all trends are. It's about keeping up with other people, isn't it? Because it's not a trend if it's no one else is doing it.
Or either that, or it's like how you want to be perceived. It's always about other people and it's not about you. It's time to put yourself first.
Exactly. And what you like, and so just not really worrying about what else is out there, because like you said, we all need clothes, and that's an important point you made at the beginning. We all need clothes. And we're not all going to walk around naked. So we do need to find a way of making clothing a more sustainable option. And having lots of unhappy people trying to keep up with one another and not enjoy it is not what we want. We want people to enjoy it and love their clothes, not treat them as disposable.
Well, this has been such an engaging conversation for me. I really, really enjoyed it. Now let's move on to the open mic section. This is your opportunity to talk about anything that you want to talk about, anything at all that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So if you don't want to talk about wardrobe and minimalism anymore, that's fair. So the floor is yours.
Oh gosh, okay. Well, it is something I'm very passionate about, is hopefully it's come across. But one thing I think that really interests me, when I started doing the research project on minimalism, I noticed this idea of children coming up quite a lot and people finding it kind of questioning how they could be a minimalist with children, because when you have a little one, their stuff, it can be problematic sometimes. It's kind of paradoxical if you're a minimalist, because children need a certain amount of things, but also the things they need change. So, you bring a baby home and it needs a baby car seat and a cot and a crib and a comforter, and then a year later it doesn't need any of those things. It needs another car seat. So children inherently need, or transitionary, they're in stage of transition. So the objects and stuff around them is also transitionary. So I was really interested in how people who are minimalists dealt with that. And if there were any people who are minimalist with children, turns out there are. There's lots. And so we went off and interviewed a bunch of parents. And I found the kind of practices that they use to kind of help them with those transitionary moments quite useful. And a lot of it was to do with basically passing things on and passing things around. So kind of a circular economy within children's objects. So I love to see more things like toy libraries, school uniform libraries, sort of libraries of children's objects, so that people could, lots of people do this informally. They share, like you were just saying before, like about getting things from relatives and things like that. But I'd love to see more things like that. We do have some toy libraries in the UK, but where you can
That's
go
amazing.
It's such a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because,
is.
yeah, because children get really bored with, that you give them something and then they're not interested in it and they go into something else. So this idea of kind of like rental or circularity within children's stuff, I think would be really interesting. And I think it's a big new thing that will hopefully get bigger over time.
Yeah, I hope to see that too. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and for spending your time with us today, Amber. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Well, probably the best thing is to look on my university landing portal page. So if you just type my name, Amber Martin-Woodhead, into Google, usually the first page that appears is something called the Pure Portal at Coventry University. If you click on that, there's a little picture of me on there and it shows all my research interests, all the stuff I published, all the talks I've done. It's kind of got everything on there, and it's got a little button if you want to contact me, and it'll send a little message to my university email. So that's probably the best thing to do. But no, I'm afraid you won't find me on any social media other than LinkedIn.
Well, amazing. We'll link that in the show notes anyway, the website and potentially LinkedIn if you like to.
Yeah, that's fine,
let's
of course.
That. So if you are interested in learning more, or I don't know, if you want to have a chat with Amber, I don't know how busy she is. She might be too busy. I'm not sure. But yeah, if you're interested, we'll link all of the links in our show notes, and you can have a look at the work that she's done. And yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.